All right. So for the purpose of today's session, I do want you to know that closed captioning is accessible in the middle of your screen, and we are going to get started. Also, we will be recording. So those are the two things I wanted to tell you before we get started. Okay, so good evening and welcome to Slippery Rock University's Power of Story Speaker Series. My name is Keisha Booker, and I am the Assistant Director for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging here at Slippery Rock University. We welcome you. So why is storytelling important? Well, stories have a transformative power that allows us to see the world in a different way than we would do if we encounter it on our own. Stories are an entry point to understanding different experiences of the world. Stories reveal truths, encourage exploration, generate curiosity, and more. They become a connective tissue between time, people, cultures, and experiences. Before we begin, we always start with a few ground rules. We would love if everyone turned their cameras on and listened to our wonderful speaker, but we totally understand if you are not able to. We do ask that everyone remain muted until the question answer portion or you are prompted to do so. When the time comes, and if you do choose to share, we ask that you share from your own experience. We ask that you do not be afraid to disagree, but do so respectfully. Always participate by choice. It's a challenge by choice activity. We ask that you don't invade the stories of others. Our goal is not to agree, but to gain a deeper understanding. And we want you to speak up, but not over each other. Tonight, we will be hearing from Dr. Lyosha Gorshkov. Lyosha is originally from Russia, holds a PhD in political science they received from Perm State University in 2009. Lyosha has introduced queer studies to the Russian political science, actively promoted LGBTQIA+ issues within Russian academia. In 2014, Lyosha was forced to leave Russia, being persecuted as an openly queer professor and advocate for LGBTQIA+ rights. Lyosha was exiled to the United States. Settling in New York City, Lyosha has emerged as one of the vocal leaders and community organizers for the Russian-speaking LGBTQIA+ immigrant community. Lyosha has served as the co-president at RUSA LGBT, the Russian-speaking American LGBTQIA+ Association, since 2015. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Dr. Lyosha Gorshkov.
Thank you, Keisha, very much. And it's a huge honor to be back to Slippery Rock because some of you who I've met, I used to work at Slippery Rock as Assistant Director for Women's and Pride Center, and it's doubly pleasure to come back and share this story, especially nowadays because we have a lot of nationwide trends going against the LGBTIQ+ community, anti-trans and anti-drag queens. I want to point out first, before I dig into the journey of exile and journey of immigration, that we, as an association of the personally, we condemn the war, right? And Russia, I consider Russia as a terrorist state, and I'm going to talk about the journey before, but how it all led towards what was going on right now in the world and what's happening in Ukraine and how Russia devastates Ukraine. And to begin with, I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. So sometimes I'm going to probably say something that could trigger someone because the story and the journey and immigrant journey is not the easiest one to the United States. I just want to give you that trigger warning, and you have to do yourself if you have to step away for a while if something triggers you. But I look forward to your questions and to answer after. So I want to just briefly, because of course the story and the stories of others who've come to the United States being identified as LGBTIQ+, absolutely colorful and intersectional and so complex. But I want to just talk through the perspective of one idea, not one identity, I will not say. There is a multiple identity involved in Russian speaking community, because it's not only Russia, it's all 12 republics. I'm not taking into the account the Baltic states, which have become the part of the EU since the collapse of the Soviet Union. But how the exile works. So I want to just briefly take us, if I can push the slides, yes. Just quickly, the exile, why I always say I'm a queer professor in exile, because I was literally forced out of the country. And exile, it's a very interesting, peculiar state of your physical local presence or even mental state, right? Basically, the old world, you will be hearing probably they've been sent to exile, meaning that people were ostracized and kicked out the local place where they used to live for any political disagreements or any social, cultural, or identity issues. So, and you can see from Merriam-Webster and Cambridge Dictionary, so it's a kind of state of a period of forced absence from one's country or home. So I'm using exile in multiple levels here in that vector, saying that I'm exiled physically because I cannot be physically in that country. I was pushed out of there, or also in the old world, I was banished from the country, right? So I'm blacklisted. And to be honest, I will tell you, it's a mark of honor to be blacklisted from Russia and to be in that blacklist of people who in 70s and 60s came to the United States as a opposition to the Soviet government. So that's what I want to just reiterate a little bit. And sometimes the term exile is used to describe an emotional and mental state of mind. You can be in exile when you self-detach yourself from certain locality, from certain environment, certain place, either, for example, in terms of LGBTIQ plus folks who are trying to figure out their identity, or they cannot find the comfort of being themselves within the local place or a place of study. That could be exile as well. So when you isolated from receiving certain resources or accessing certain resources. So, or you can self-exile yourself because your mental state, in terms of you don't feel comfortable in the particular place of being, a particular time and space. So there's also different ways to describe that exile. So I think in my case, I'm physically exiled and also emotionally and culturally removed from that experience. But the peculiar part, and there are some quotes about exile, right? So you can see that. But I want to point out that exile and being in immigration, it's a very difficult journey for every single immigrant who has ever gone through the journey, and especially coming from one continent, from one culture to another culture, deeping into the absolutely new world, the world you have not known, or you've known only from the preconceived notions, from the pictures of Hollywood. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But my journey of exile actually did not start with myself, because originally my whole family come from the German lineage. So my ancestors came to Russia, to Empire Russia in 18th century. They were first German family to settle down in the Volga region in the south of Russia. And after that, they organized their own cantons or own governments within the Russian Empire. And at that time, the Catherine the Great was promising them the golden hills, the Klondike of if you come and cultivate land in the Russian Empire. And of course, all promises were not kept. So my family ended up being farmers and peasants. And eventually and you can see my great-grandparents and my grandmother in the bottom. So, but the problem with that, during the Soviet reign, when Bolsheviks and Stalin seized the power, especially during the Stalin's reign, they started persecuting every single person who did not agree with the government or was not the same. And at that time, my great-grandfather was accused of stealing the bread from the Soviet government because he had the house, he had the horse, he had the cow. He was declared as enemy of the people, sentenced to 5 years of labor, and eventually exiled from his place, from the German Republic of Volga region to the Urals, to the northeast of Russia, where I was born. So at that time, my grandmother was 10. She basically everything was taken away. They were put in the cattle cars, and in a week journey, they rode the train with the hundreds of others within one car, and everything was taken. Even the name was taken from her, so she had to Russify her name. So my family is Klauser. She was Emma, but her name was changed. And basically, that politics and that identity of exile, it's deep ingrained and in us, and it's a traumatic experience which kind of goes from generation to generation, because my grandmother never, till her death, ever mentioned that she was German. especially you can imagine after during the World War II, being German in Russia, it was kind of very problematic. So basically, I didn't know till I was 12, and at 12, when I was told from my mother that we were Germans, it made sense because kind of culturally we never fit that Russian ensemble of myths and legends. So, but that's how I think of myself, of my exile, as a circle of the cycle of life. So I was the only one who escaped that cycle, who broke that cycle and left that country for the United States. But that's how my little history starts. And my mother and her siblings were born in a small village in Russia, and they were German family within the Russian population. And sometimes it will create a lot of tensions between. So, but I still think about that place of exile, a place of my childbirth and childhood and grandmother as a nostalgic places, the places of peace and freedom, because of course I was carefree. So, and I was born, hard to tell you, but I was born in 1985 when the Soviet Union still existed and perestroika started. So basically I'm a person of liberal honeymoon of the Soviet and post-Soviet era. I was born in the family of single mother, of the teacher, principal of the school, and that kind of impacted and influenced my upbringing. But of course, when I was growing up, and I will tell you, in Soviet Union, we had gender neutral bathrooms. So every single person in kindergarten will go into the same toilet, into the same shower. We didn't have separation in our kindergarten. And also considering the education, my mom never gendered my education. She didn't say you have to play only with cars or the also whatever. So I will play with the kitchen cabinets. She will buy me that great kitchen furniture, like small for children. We didn't have Barbies, we had Soviet dolls, but that was not harsh during the Soviet period of time. There was no gender, there was no concept of gender identity. So people just did not think that the people who young and kids will play with dolls and will become someone. So the language of queerness did not exist. That's why people look at me as a eccentric, extraordinary child who just wants to play with dolls. What the big deal out of that? So, and it was a kind of great time and not great time, because imagine you wake up and there is no country anymore. So in 1991, the Soviet Union collapses. And that's how I actually, when COVID hit, I was in Sleepy Rock and worked for Sleepy Rock. For me, coming to COVID was not the greatest shock of my life, because I experienced that collapse of the whole country. The system dissipated, nothing. So the country just lost. There is nothing anymore. So that was a huge turmoil, and it brought us to 90s. And 90s actually in Russia was a very great moment to be, in terms of everything was accessible. Freedom of speech, freedom of expression. Nobody cared anymore. The tolerance level of Russia grew drastically. Everybody would talk about sex. Everybody would talk about queerness. Everybody would talk about, or there's a trans people, of course, in different language, but the society started melting a little bit down towards the acceptance. Of course, in the big cities, in urban cities. But remember, I was born in a small town, and they're semi-industrial, semi-rural, and I did not know till the certain point that I was queer, right? So I always had some tensions and some tendencies, as I will say, but there was no language, there was nothing. And when coming out was a little bit very complicated in terms of you literally think that you're only one person in the whole town who experiences the same tensions or the same attractions to people. So it was a journey for me, but my mom was very accepting, and my cousin. So the coming out was not easy because there was no any outlet. The only outlet I had at that time is cable TV, which showed the American movies. And the first American movie and I ever seen called Trick, it's 1999. And it's one of my favorite movies still. And when I came to the States and lived in New York City, I kind of could feel the same vibe. But that was the only outlet for me, because I see the movie, I watch the movie, I think, oh my gosh, somewhere there in the land of abundance, in the land of plenty, people like myself. And that's a very interesting journey in my mind, because even when I was 4 years old, I told my mom I will be living in the city with the lady with torch. So that desire to escape, that desire to leave that obsolete world of Soviet and post-Soviet Russia kind of haunted me since I was 4. But it was just, the dream, the imagination. Nobody will think that it ever happened. But when I came to college, and the college in 2000s, the Putin came to power, and country started changing drastically. Not at first. At first, we still felt that opportunity to be ourselves, and I was able to defend my PhD thesis in 2009 on minorities, and one of the groups I studied was LGBTIQ+. We called them minorities, and that time it was appropriate language. But my department in that Perm State University was very liberal, was very accepting, but not the country per se. Country started changing. Country started kind of rounding up those ideas and trying to suppress everything what we achieved through the 90s. So liberalization came to halt, and Putin started seizing all aspects of people's lives, because his KGB conscious, his Gestapo conscious, so that secret police conscious, could not allow him to act or otherwise. So he started looking for enemies within and outside. And of course, the old enemy, which always bothered the patriots, the true Russians who never drink, those Russians on the horses, like Putin himself semi-naked, it's queerness and the United States. So when I was already professor, tenured professor, all of the sudden, here is just like some reminiscence, because when I was coming out and when I got to college, I was 17, clubs already did not exist in my town. It was underground, and you see the buildings in the kind of corners. One of the government buildings had the secret underground queer club during Saturdays and Sundays. We will gather there because of corruption, and people knew someone who would give the access and who was queer, closeted queer in government. Or it was a part of the architecture college, which we will gather in the dining room during the Fridays and Saturdays, shabash. So it's a lot of interest in how to be queer, even if it was liberal in 90s, but still not liberal in small towns, how people survived. And all of a sudden, even that became targeted by the government. The government started officially looking for witches, started that witch hunt. It did not happen overnight. So people needed to be brainwashed in order to believe that there is outside some enemies who might take your personal belongings or your children away, and those enemies queer. So when it started changing very much. So as I said, I was already tenured professor, and all of a sudden in 2010, the law came to effect, pedophilia law. And pedophilia law, it's absolutely tricky and very murky, because it doesn't have any essence besides the fact that people would say, okay, it's not even the law, but the propaganda around you. If you turn TV on during the 2010, everywhere, every single channel, you turned on the first channel, the government channel, pedophiles, the cohort of pedophiles taken into the custody, pedophiles, parents, be careful, because every single person you see on the street, they potentially pedophiles. So there are so many brainwashing elements were planted in the people's minds, and all of a sudden they started associating LGBTIQ plus folks, especially people who identify queer men, with pedophiles. So that's all rhetoric that in the United States existed in 70s. Anita Bryant, we remembered her movement Save the Children. So basically that's what started kind of trickling down, and all of us professors, teachers were required to go to the local police precinct to obtain the special record, the special document every single summer that we never been charged with pedophilia, in order to continue working for university. But university does not deal with kids. So university is usually over 18. In Russian law, the pedophilia, the heterosexual pedophilia, it's up to 14 years old. And homosexual pedophilia, which you see already inequality, it's up to 16. I never worked with children. I never worked with teenagers. But anyway, that was a tool to control. It was not the real tool to prevent children from getting hurt from the real people who want them to be hurt, right? But it's only to control the certain aspects of your life. So, and that's after that, it started like trickling down. It was the Dima Yakovlev law, which prohibited all foreigners to adopt Russian children because there was a huge propaganda saying all Americans, they adopt our children to sexually abuse them and enslave them, blah, blah, blah. And all imagine Russia, right? It's like Russia and the United States not far away from each other in terms of propaganda machine, but Russia has limited sources of information. And all parents scared of that started voting in the school boards to kind of repeal all of those activities which related to gender and gender identity. And that time I was already teaching queer studies. I was doing a lot, but iron kisses, as I call, and you see myself, it's during one of the workshops which I had with the Soros Foundation in Ukraine for 3 years, sex, power, sex, and gender, which we had the great time. But on the other side is Lubyanka. Lubyanka is the headquarter of KGB, or Federal Security Services. So basically, here became the whole movement of anti-LGBTIQ plus politics. And eventually in 2013, the Duma, which is Russian parliament, the like your house here, right? The House of Representatives, introduced the propaganda law called to persecute any anti-traditional activities, which meant, actually it's very vague when they say what is anti-traditional? What the hell anti-traditional is? What is traditional in Russia? Nothing is traditional in Russia. Soviet Russia Empire, Russian Empire has been combined from so multitude of cultures and events, and against all the odds, Russia never been religious country. So Russia's been, they had like orthodoxy in the Russian Empire, but who cared? Everybody did whatever they wanted in terms of like if you aristocrat or male peasant, right? Sexism still existed. Or during, you know, even post-Soviet Russia, the religion has not played much role until Putin, when he started employing the church and kind of using the church to brainwash the population. That's why we, all of a sudden, we started using all of the Sodom idea or idea of the Leviticus 18 and everything, right? So in that cohesion, the government, the church, and the media, they started all together creating that enemy within, and they said, we have to prevent our children. Actually, I'm going to tell it now, if you have any resemblance what is going on in one of the states, or a couple of states in the United States, which is copycatting Putin's anti-propaganda law, saying we have to remove all kind of references to non-traditional values, non-traditional references to the alternative lifestyles. So basically that meant LGBTIQ plus, right? So they started publicly denouncing, and that when the all hell broke loose, I was already not only a tenured professor, I was deputy dean of student affairs, and all of a sudden I got the knock in my door by the security services of the university, and who the guy tells me, oh, there is a new person who was appointed to the head of the university who wants to meet with you. He is a great guy. You have to meet with him. You have to meet. And if you ever, I know you're young generation, but if you ever heard of any stories of spies, right, or any secretive meetings, so I went to that meeting. You go to the building, there is a door, nothing on the door, no signage. You go inside that room. The room furnished in the 1970s furniture. There is no computers, nothing. And that sits the guy. It's typical KGB tactics. And he starts talking to me. He's like, you know, the world is changing rapidly. We have to protect our university, protect the head of the university. And he basically starts recruiting me to be that person who would report on the colleagues and students. He's saying to me, knowing who I am, knowing what I am, because KGB or Secret Services started following me since 2010. So I knew that was already the case. And he just like, if you know anyone who is nationalist, communist, homosexualist, will you tell it to me? And all of a sudden, after that, my apartment was under watch. Somebody was following always me. That guy, I'm not even joking. I'm not exaggerating. I walk through the university and that guy appears from out of nowhere, like, like a ghost. So they have their ways and they start intimidation tactics until eventually in March of 2014, what is February, March 2014? Crimea was annexed by Russian aggression, right? So, and we were pro-Ukrainian, we in political science, so, and also queer. All of a sudden, the article came out about me saying that we're Perm looking at the propaganda of sodomy at Perm State University. So basically, that article was dedicated to myself, saying that I'm promoting that perversions. So I'm a pervert. I have to be fired on the spot. At that time, as I said, I started getting a lot of calls, death threats. Not to mention that long before I had the physical violence against myself. My chin is cut and stitched. So there is my half of my face was paralyzed because I was beaten up during the student years because of homophobia attacks. So there is a lot of things, and all of a sudden, when you know the big brother after you, that's it. That's a death sentence in Russia. You know already that you're doomed. You don't have any other escape. But what you have to do, you have to play idiot. You have to play fool. You have to pretend that you don't understand. So that's what I was playing cats and mice with that guy, because I was saying, I don't know anything. I don't know anything about anyone, right? But they already were crawling under the skin, trying to kind of limit my ability or eventually fire me on the spot. If they fired me, it will be easiest thing because it could have been something else. So basically, all of that was unfolding, and I'm of course telling you in a very short version. But I had to switch my apartments. I had to get into the apartment of my friend, whose building was secured. I had to be driven to my work with the private chauffeur or the private driver for the remaining. But I could not share anything with anyone. That's the worst part. You cannot share with anyone because you don't want to jeopardize anyone's safety. So eventually I had to play cool every single day, come into the university. You never know it's your last day or not. But what you have to do, and that's what being queer and non-binary and that non-conforming person in Russia means, you have to find a way how to survive at the same time not bending over to the rules. So that's what all of my life looked like, and that's what I built up reputation. But I had to play cool. I had to always perform. When you go to students to teach, you performing. You have to perform. Because you cannot show the fear which is on your face. So in your voice, you have to maintain that acting in order for them not to be despaired, right? So, but I had to wait till July 2014 when my vacation started. Once my day of vacation came off, I went. I took my one suitcase and never returned to Russia. So July 28th, 2014, I got on the plane in Moscow through Finland, through Helsinki. It was I guess the toughest ever journey in my life, when you take off and you understand you have not processed yet, but on the plane you start processing. That's it. That's the end. And you go to the country, you have no connections, you have no friends there, you have no idea what the future holds, because I did not have any accommodations there. So besides couple, one of the friend who emigrated in 2006, but she was deeply after the birth, she gave birth, she did not have much time. So I land in New York City with no plan whatsoever besides the apartment. I was able, but I had to get money from my friend who lended to me to hire to rent the apartment for a whole year, because when you don't have any papers, you cannot rent. You don't have credit score, you have nothing. And I did not know anything much about. I knew about the United States, but you don't know the moving pieces within. That's how I came to the United States. I'm going to skip a couple of that, to the United States. And what is America? What is the land of plenty? As I said, with the collapse of the Soviet Union, a lot of American products started coming to us. But what products and what information? You see the beautiful description of America on the TV. There was a huge program I always watched called America with Yulia Taratuta. Taratuta was the kind of like news person. And they all will say, oh my God, look at the America. America is so rich. America has equality. America is this, America is that. And you dream about land, and you see that TV show, which I loved, called The Winter Cherry. It's a very interesting story. That's how all Soviets and Russians have that preconception about the United States. The story goes that it's a poor woman lives in the poor neighborhood in Moscow, and she hangs out with the pimps and the sex workers. So her best friend is a kind of pimp, and they all great together. And she falls in love with the poor history teacher, but he is married, and that's all drama unfolds. And eventually, American comes to Moscow, and they meet and takes her away. And 1 year from that, she comes in Gucci and Chanel, and she goes in all of that dressed up from the airport to that poor neighborhood where her friends still doing sex work, and she's that all spruced up, made up. And that's the representation of the United States, white, rich America, which doesn't have any other indication. So that's how we all perceived until we started studying. But even what we knew about the United States, that it's segregation and racism going on, but not to the extent when you live there. So I land up in New York City, and you can see when we didn't have furniture, so I had to live in Brooklyn, in Midwood, which is the part of the Russian-speaking community. But I didn't know. Imagine waking up in other country, but you're like never escape from Russia, because that neighborhood consists of those exilees from the Soviet Russia who never changed their attitude. So basically, it took me forever, no much language, nothing in terms of like how you're going to conduct yourself, who you're going to be. And it's very hard time, especially for the first month, not knowing anyone. I was just living in that silence because I could not speak much language. I could not communicate. I could not find any people. So every single day I will go to the hop on the subway and go somewhere just to walk around.
Why do we have so many extras? That's awesome.
Until you realize that you have to build the whole agenda, and you come to the point when you realize there is no money, you have to do something. So for the first, I filed for asylum, and I filed for adjustment of the status to get the immigration status. So, but it took for the whole 2 years to get to the interview. But basically, when you come and claim asylum you can claim on the 5 grounds, and one of the grounds to be a part of the social group, and that's a euphemism for LGBTIQ+. So I filed that documents, and I had to wait instead of 1 month, I had to wait 2 years to get to the interview. But that's and my story was compelling for the officers, but I'm not going to go to that. But that another layer of an anxiety, because you do not know it's a no end game. So because you don't know how it's going to work out, right? In the meantime, when you wait for the interview, how you're going to survive? For the 2 years, I had to I worked off the book for one of my friend's company to deliver the postcards with the movies when they were promoting to the different parts of New York. So I will have my bag and walk around the city distributing those postcards. And I was grateful for that because I didn't have any expectations. So I knew I had to start from scratch. So it took me 5 years to get back to academia, but how? Through the personal perseverance, for pushing myself, because I did not, I didn't have time to reflect on that. I had to do something, and it was very, very, very fast paced in New York City. But challenges of exile, there's so multitude of those, right? So it's individual. So not everyone is able to go through exile. Political, you don't know what the government policies on immigrants, right? At certain point. Institutional, you don't know if you have any institutional support, if you can legally work, if you can have the healthcare in New York City, kind of we could. The cultural shock, because everything is new. You don't know anything. You don't understand the traditions. You don't understand the language. You have a lot of barriers. It takes time, and that creates a lot of barriers. But it's the beauty of that. But not everyone is going through. So we've had people who gave up, who came back to their countries, or ended up in the excessive drinking or usage of drugs, so everything, because it's definitely so much pressure on you. It's so much to go through, and not everyone is ready. Immigration journey for every single immigrant, regardless the background, and of course for some immigrants it's double. Of course we are white immigrants from the Caucasian countries, but some people who come from Latin America, right, or from Syria, I have queer friends from Iran, from North Korea. So it's absolutely different journey, because there is a double standards or still those discriminatory notions. But how we survive, right? We survive creating the community. And there is a beautiful golden girl saying, thank you for being a friend, right? If you ever known about that TV show. So, and I'm actually the Sophia with the glasses, that old lady who always curses everyone. That's where I'm at right now. But it brought me to community. It brought me, because I knew I didn't want to sit down. I had to do something. And I've seen how LGBTIQ plus immigrants were mistreated by the government, by the local communities. So I started meeting with the Russian-speaking communities, and eventually emerged as the leader to bring us together. And I'm very proud of achievements. I don't want to focus a lot, but RUSA LGBTIQ plus organization, which I'm part of and used to be a co-president and board member. So that's a lot to accommodate a lot of people from all the Republic of Post-Soviet Union, right? So that you can see on the screen some services we've created, we've provided. But the biggest achievement for myself, and I'm proud of that, is creating the Brighton Beach Pride. The Brighton Beach Pride is a Russian-speaking pride, first ever in the history across the board. Across the diaspora. So basically Brighton Beach Pride happens in Brighton Beach, but Brighton Beach in New York City, it's a kind of the snake pit of the Soviet immigration, which is absolute sexist, racist, homophobic. And 70% of us immigrants coming from those countries settles down there because the language, because similarities with something, but instead of thriving, we re-traumatizing ourselves, because we encounter the daily homophobia on the workplace, in the renting facilities, because those people have never left Soviet Union mentally. They're frozen in time, and they're so disgusting towards other people. So that's why it was crucial to us to have that pride. And this year we had the 7th pride. So we've been through 7th pride, and every single year we go on the boardwalk to show that we're still there, we're queer, we're here. And for 2 years in a row, of course, we had the main topic, it's Ukraine, right? And the war and anti-Russian stances. But Brighton Beach is a community, because we can go to New York City Pride, but it's not the same. New York City Pride has been spruced up and commercialized for the last years. We don't feel there the part, because something we could never have in our countries, to be with our language, with our people. That's Brighton Beach is about. And here, as you can see, we always have the orchestra with us, Rude Mechanical Orchestra, Left Radical, amazing band. We love them. We go and we make a noise, and all babushkas in Brighton Beach think it's a funeral of the general secretary of Communist Party. So because they still do not believe that queer people are there. So many queer people, queer identified folks. And here are some other journeys I want to point out. So because of my public activism, because of my recognition by the New York government and input into that's another story which I want to point out. When you immigrant and you have no credentials, nobody cares about you in the United States. No one. So you have to prove, you have to go through status. Socioeconomic status is very important here. And it took me through the volunteer experience with RUSA LGBT, when finally people started noticing, when New York Times came up with the article, Vice, I've been everywhere. Not for myself, I don't care, but for the community, they start recognizing the needs of LGBTIQ plus immigrants. So I've been finally getting into, and I work actually for the 3 years in a nonprofit organization serving people with HIV/AIDS, people with homelessness, suicidal ideation, people with mental health. So I've seen also the structure and the systems of imbalance and the inequality within. And that eventually brought me back to academia. And I was invited to do, as a visiting scholar to the Indiana University in Bloomington. I taught the course there. And while I was there, I was contacted by the Slippery Rock University, which I put the application for. And I still remember Kevin called me and invited me for the first interview. And after that, I flew to Pittsburgh. And that was meant to be. So Slippery Rock has became rather the first integral part for me to coming back to resurrect from exile, from my mental exile, to continue my professional career. And here you can see that the first day when I came to Slippery Rock on October 19, 2019, and interns put that beautiful door. There's that team of Office for Inclusive Excellence, and you see when we were playing ping pong with grad assistants I forgot the name of the place where the fireplace, I guess something like, I forgot, Fisher. It's some but it was beautiful. Yes. We were there after COVID already. It's still COVID, but we had that great party. And now I'm at Colgate University. So through all the odds, when I was at Slippery Rock, I got the invitation to apply for Colgate, and I did not know anything about Colgate, right? So they contacted me through LinkedIn. So I went through the whole interview process, and eventually they hired me as the director of LGBTQ+ initiatives. And I'm very happy to be at Colgate. I'm very happy to be in this small place, which kind of resembles my village from my childhood. It's like my comfortable space. And Colgate University 4-year is a grad program or undergrad program, and we've evolved so much for the last year. So being at Colgate gives me a lot of hope, because I see how people bring forward ideas of social justice. We're helping them to navigate. And this year I also was named as co-director of Hancock Commons, and we have common system. It's like a Hogwarts. We have 4 commons, and every single first year assigned to one of the commons. So basically at Colgate, I continue the journey of social justice, journey of education, professional growth, and also I have my other occupations. So last year I got the house, and I replicate my little piece of land exactly in honor of my German grandmother, putting together the same plans. And here you see me putting the roof on the coop and have chickens. So basically, it's very short description. I could go on and go on, but the lesson what I've learned from being, so it's very difficult not to give up at some point. It's very difficult not to feel upside down. And the only thing I always know, and it's going to be gone with me, so I never can be able to get back, right? I never can will be able to go and see my family, and I haven't seen my family since I left, only through social media, let's say. But that's a part of immigration, and that's what you deal with. Also, how you can detach yourself and not to let it to destroy you, because you know that some emotional ties left there, and you will never be able, in my age, when I came to the States, to kind of put the puzzle together. And I have to live with that for the rest of my life, knowing that I will never be here and I will never be there. So that transitional period for me, not being here and not being there, that's how I feel and define my exile. And also I tried some being a drag show in different, for fundraising reasons for RUSA LGBTIQ. So that's exactly but I recognize the difficulties of the United States, that I'm not the biggest fan of the government and how everything goes. That's why what not concerns me, that a lot of things what I've seen in my country replicated in anti-LGBTIQ+ policies there. Don't Say Gay bill, exactly what 2013 bill represents. And staying on top, being engaged with your political agenda, being engaged with your civic society is very crucial and important. And I hope that with the a possibility of sharing stories and seeing others and other demographics, other groups and other backgrounds will kind of help us to become better in how we approach the world and how we address the world. I know we came to the time of Q&A. I want to just stop sharing to see more people, but it's not, of course, the comprehensive story. I'm just try to get the only hold of couple of points, but I'm very, very happy to answer any of your questions if you might have.
Okay, we will take questions in the chat, or you are welcome to unmute yourself and we will ask questions there. I will start us off, I guess, while we wait. And being that it is LGBT History